Hi, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're well. A few weeks ago, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Tom Humble, a photographer from Southend-on-Sea, for a long-form conversation about his experience as a photographer and a bunch of other stuff. Some of you might remember that on my recent Film Pickups episode, we talked about his book, The Winter We Walked Alone. It's a wonderful book. If you haven't gotten your hands on it yet, I highly recommend it. But yeah, I am a huge fan of long form conversations and interviews and podcasts, and I would like to bring more of these types of conversations to my channel. And this one is a step in that direction. This one, Tom will be talking for all of it because I only had one mic, but maybe in the future this could evolve into a two-way conversations. I would like to thank Graham, who's a photographer, for allowing us to use his studio, the Glass Factory, for shooting this video. I'm fairly new to this interview audio situation, so my apologies if it's not at 100%. But anyway, that's enough of that. Let's hear what Tom has to say.
I do, wake up and go to sleep thinking about photos or photo projects or ideas. Like I said to you, I could be listening to a song and hear a lyric, and all of a sudden that'll make me think of a photo idea, so it's like photography is always on my brain. And I think for most photographers that's just how it is. Once you get that bug, you can't shake it. I thought documenting my hometown would be a great place to start, and initially I had the idea to just take pictures of the whole town, over like a decade, and kind of cherry pick the best images and make a book out of that. But then towards the end of 2020, obviously we'd just come out, well, we hadn't come out, we were still heavily in the COVID pandemic. Being a wedding photographer, it wasn't the best kind of time for us. And then towards the end of 2020, I don't know, like I had a little bit of a breakdown. I was suffering like mentally. It was just a horrible time. My granddad passed away, my wife's nan passed away, like our business wasn't doing well. I needed something, and I just started going out with my Mamiya RV67 and just kind of walking. And I knew I wanted to start documenting like my hometown, so I started trying to do something just because I had all this spare time. I wasn't working, I was just sitting at home doing nothing. We were allowed our daily exercise, weren't we? Like an hour a day. They said, oh, you can go out for a walk and then get your butts home. So I started using that to just go out walking with my camera, as I'm sure a lot of other photographers did. And then, yeah, slowly I just started finding myself being drawn to the seafront, and I was doing this almost like same daily walk, just up and down this stretch of seafront, like a couple of miles along by the beach. And after about a month and a half, I started noticing all these like subconscious things coming out in the photos. Like my photos were, I guess, representing how I was feeling at the time, like just kind of depressed, lonely, all these like horrible feelings. You could see them just from looking at the photos, and I was like, that's interesting that it's kind of taken on that role by itself. I wasn't purposely, I was literally just walking around taking photos. But once I cottoned on what was happening, I started more purposely doing it, and then I started asking people I'd met for their portraits as well. So I was kind of taking photos of things I saw, people that I met, stopping and talking to them. And I just did that for like 4 months. It kept me busy, and at the end of it, lockdown had ended. So the last picture I took is on the last page of the book, of 2 people sitting on a bench having a little conversation, and that's literally the day after they said you're allowed to meet other people now. And I saw these 2 people sitting on the bench, and I snapped it, and I thought, it's done. The project, it's not how it was now. Like, it feels safer, it feels nicer, like restrictions are easing. I was like, it feels done. So I was done with it. And then I just left it for a while, and I sat on kind of all these negatives, and I didn't do anything with it. And it wasn't until later on in the year that I started going through them and then thinking, oh, actually, I've potentially got a book here. Then I made a couple of mock books up until, it took me months. I didn't realize how hard it was to make a photo book, like going through all the motions and the processes. And I taught myself how to use like Adobe After Effects and all this kind of thing to make the book. And then, yeah, finally got there. So I decided as well to donate 50% of all the profits to the mental health charity Mind, because just working on that book really helped me get over my own issues. I think a lot of photographers use photography as almost like a, therapeutic endeavor. It helps them out, going out with, there's nothing better if you're depressed or, just not feeling great. Just going for a walk with a camera is so good for my soul anyway. So 50, I basically knew I wasn't going to make a ton of money from it. Like, that wasn't the point of the book, was to make money. The point was to just kind of get something out there, see how it goes, figure it all out, and do some good for charity, I suppose. My interest in photography proper picked up shortly after I got married in around 2014. And I remember it being around that time because I remember being really interested in what my wedding photographer was doing and the photos that she gave us, and really I always had like a small interest in photography. Like, I was always the one on nights out that would have, like a little digital camera, and I'd just document the night. I was always interested in, like camera phones when they first came about and using those for taking photos. So I always had like a slight interest, but I'd never actually held an actual proper, camera in my hands. And shortly after I got married, my father-in-law, he's got an interest in photography, in digital photography anyway. And he had upgraded his camera and he gave me like his old one. So I got his hand-me-down, which was like a Canon, something like a Canon 500D or 600D, one of their lower end entry models, just that and a kit lens. And I very, very quickly became hooked on, using that camera, documenting my son growing up. He was around 2 years old at the time. And I started getting interested in things like landscape photography, like macro photography, all this kind of things. And just, I enjoyed figuring out how to use the camera, manually. And then, it kind of progressed. Like, people started seeing me taking pictures of my own children and saying, oh, those are really great pictures. Would you take pictures of my kids? Like friends or friends of friends. And it just kind of evolved from there. I started charging for portrait sessions, and then someone asked me to do my first wedding. So they were fully aware I hadn't shot one, and it was kind of a friend of a friend who was on a bit of a budget. So they took a punt on me, which I really appreciate. I did that. Obviously, I was completely nervous and completely out of my depth, as you can imagine. But I really loved doing it, and they really liked the photos. And then at that time, I was working in sales and marketing, and the company I was working for had sent me on this like 3-month-long social media marketing course. And as I was learning all these things about marketing businesses, I was also implementing that within my own business. So actually, by the time I'd finished the course, I was pretty much ready to just leave and go full-time with photography. And I did. I handed in my notice. I said, thank you for everything, thanks for sending me on that course. And went full-time with photography. So so anyone who was looking to get into wedding photography themselves, I'd recommend trying to second shoot with someone else first and foremost. So that's where you go work with another main shooter. So it's their booking, their job, the whole pressure and everything is on them. You just come along to help, capture more of the candid moments. Maybe they're doing bridal prep, you go do groom prep and stuff like that. I worked with another photographer. He was in his late 50s at the time. And he'd been doing it for years, like 20 years. He'd been doing it a long time. And he took me on to kind of help him out. And I worked with him for a good 6 months, which really taught me a lot about wedding photography and how the day, should run. He was very regimented in setting his ways though. And, he'd kind of walk around barking orders at people, telling them where to stand. And I soon kind of realized that wasn't the style of photography I wanted to do. I know a lot of people say it nowadays, but I just really wanted to do sort of candid, unobtrusive, more sort of documentary. You guys, you crack on, go have fun. Let me capture it as it unfolds. After 6 months, I kind of just went out on my own and started pushing more of my own weddings and doing it my way. So YouTube started for me in 2019, I think, when I initially became interested in film photography. once I started shooting a lot more film and I figured out how to develop film myself, you know, I was kind of learning from other YouTube videos. I was watching other people and figuring it all out. So then I started making videos kind of just documenting how I was getting on with it, you know, and then what I'd picked up and what I'd learned, I'd try to put in a YouTube video in more layman's terms and make it like really simple, like this is how I develop film in the easiest way, shape or form in my kitchen sink, you know. And then when I started becoming interested in film more, I wanted to get like a medium format camera. So I went through a stint of like renting a bunch of different cameras, trying them out and making videos, kind of sharing my thoughts on the camera. And it just kind of grew from there. I mean, the thing is, obviously, when you do a job that's quite intense as that in terms of how much you're using a camera, like especially up through the summer season, there were some days where I'd be working like 4 weddings in a row, you know, a week, and then the next week working 3 in a row, and then the next week working another 4 in a row. So it's a lot of using the cameras, and on your day off, you might feel a little bit uninspired to then pick up the camera again because you've been shooting with it all week. And that's kind of around the time that I actually found film photography. 2019, I think, is when I picked up my first film camera, as a way of being able to still be inspired to take photos when I wasn't working, you know, because the digital cameras, although I still use them, you know, I've got like a little Fuji X100V at the moment, which I love going out and shooting because it can kind of fit in my coat pocket. But it kind of killed that love for photography when you do it so intense with work. So I started shooting a lot more film, and that kind of re-inspired me. It's a much, as you know, like slower process. It's completely different to shooting digital. And yes, I still enjoy taking things like landscapes and, you know, streetscapes and stuff like that. I still enjoy street photography, but for me, my main love is like social documentary photography. You know, my whole love of photography initially started from, you know, documenting my own family, my wife, my children, you know, my close relatives, documenting them over time, and then even, you know, weddings. Like that's just me wanting to document these other people, like document their day. You know, I love social documentary photography, and yeah, I still love all kinds of photography. I've dabbled in all kind of aspects, but I think for me, social documentary and portraits are kind of where I really see myself kind of honing in on as I go forwards. In terms of staying motivated, that's definitely a massive problem for most photographers, right? Like you can get stuck in a rut, you can feel like you're just doing the same thing and all your images are looking the same, and you lose inspiration. You know, like I've said, working the amount I do, taking photography, you know, I can be on my feet for 10 hours a day, just constantly taking pictures for 10 hours a day. So it's hard if I do that for 3 days in a row, and then I've got a Sunday off with my family, to then want to hold a camera, you know, when you've been holding it for 3 days straight. Like, so it's hard to get motivated in that aspect. Also just, you know, having this sort of work-life balance. You know, I've got a wife, I've got 2 small children, my son's almost 10, my daughter's 6, they need attention, they need love. So just finding the time to go out and take pictures. Like I almost missed lockdown just because I had all that time available. Like to work on another project, I basically need another 6 months lockdown just to find the time. But it's not, you know, I'm still inspired. You know, I still have plenty of ideas I want to achieve. It is just, you know, finding that time and motivation to get out there. But with the last project, I've found once you start, that's when kind of inspiration comes, and often you might have an idea for a project that's not quite honed, and you don't want to start it until it's finished. But, you know, I definitely recommend just starting it, because often these projects evolve once they begin, and you come up with new ideas that you may not have thought about. Only by doing it has that come about, you know. The same as like photography becomes a bit of an addiction, doesn't it? Like you get, what do they call it? Gear acquisition syndrome. So you're constantly looking for a new lens or new camera or something that's going to make you better. I think the same thing happens once you start getting interested in photobooks. You definitely become a little bit addicted as well, in terms of buying new ones. You learn about new photographers you've never heard of, and heard that they've got like 4 photobooks, and all of a sudden you need to own every single photobook that they've ever made. So I take a lot of inspiration from people like Joel Sternfield, obviously Alex Sof, Mark Steinmetz, Richard Rothman is a new, have you heard of him? New interest of mine. So yeah, just a few photo books and stuff that really inspire me for my own projects, you know, kind of make you think about how, you know, once you see a book and how they've done it, it kind of changes your thinking about how projects should be done. Like the Joel Sternfield's Stranger Passing. Have you seen that? I brought a few books for you to look through if you want to look through it. But basically that's just, he was traveling all across America, just taking pictures of people that he met, you know, along the way. And he did that for decades. And the book is kind of like decades worth of his favorite photos from that thing. And that really made me think that actually, yeah, like project work doesn't need to be done over a short space of time, you know, it could be done over years and years and years. And then at the end, just think to yourself, oh, let me have a look through this archive of negatives I've got and pick like the better ones. There's a one, Richard Rothman, Redwood Saw was a book that I've got sort of at the end of last year. I think we spoke about it before, yeah. And it was just basically, he shoots large format 4x5, which was around the time I got into large format, so that's why I ended up finding him. And he did a lot of like architectural photography and stuff like that. And I think he was getting bored of like taking pictures of buildings, so he just randomly just thought to himself, right, I'm going to go live in the woods for a while, like in a tent, and take the pictures of trees. I really want to get to one with nature. And he went to like stay in this forest, near a redwood forest, like near a town called Redwood Saw or something like that. And he was just constantly taking pictures of the trees and like living and breathing, taking pictures of the forest. And then I think a few of like the residents of the town started noticing there was a man living in the woods with a tent, you know, and a camera, and approached him. And then he eventually started taking pictures of the residents of the town, you know, and the actual town itself. And he kind of slowly came out of the forest and documented the town. And the way his book is laid out, it's like the first half of the book is just pictures of trees, like beautiful pictures, black and white images of trees. And then the second half is social documentary pictures of this town and the people who live in it. And that goes into what I said earlier about projects evolving over time. And that really sort of inspired me as well, that like, you really have to get started on a project for it to evolve. Before you even know what it's going to end up being, you just have to go out and do it, don't you? You know, he went out with the intention of just taking pictures of trees, and some of the images in this book are just, you know, crazy good. His portraits, and he didn't even go out with the intention of taking portraits of people, you know. So yeah, that really inspires me. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple that I've got on at the Mo. There's one I'm working on where basically when I started shooting large format, I started always bringing the camera with me to weddings that I was working and just leaving it in my boot. And initially that was like when I was shooting couple portraits, I wanted to be able to take some portraits of them on, you know, 4x5 large format film. But then I soon started becoming much more interested in, you know, the wedding guests and their stories. And there's a few photos that I've, you know, already taken. But basically I just bring it along on wedding days, and if there's an interesting guest I find, or I feel like they've got an interesting story, like all the people I've taken pictures of so far have an element to play on the wedding day. You know, like I took a picture of one of the groom's nephew who was there on the day. He was a really interesting character. He had like a cool weird hat, and he played guitar, as they come down the aisle, so that was interesting. There was one I was working at, there was like a thrown together summer sort of teepee tent barbecue wedding, and something had happened where the caterers had pulled out last minute, and two of the guests, like one was like relation to the bride and one was like a family friend to the groom. They were just like, we'll do the cooking, and they got behind the barbecue and they cooked like literally everyone at the wedding, the wedding foods. I took their photo, just things like that, like wedding guests that have played an important part of that wedding day. So I've started that, and that's just a project that I thought I could just keep going for as long as I'm a wedding photographer, you know, another 5, 10, 15, however long years, and at the end, make a book out of it. There's another project I started documenting some local high-rises to me, like tower blocks of flats. There's these flats that I kind of grew up near, a few of my friends lived them. They're kind of, you know, council flats where the poor people get put and forgotten about. And I've always been really interested in them. They're kind of overlooking parts of Southend, like Southend High Street. You can see them from like wherever you are in Southend. And yeah, I've always just been really interested in them. So I've started kind of documenting these flats from afar with the aim to slowly get closer and closer and eventually in, and talking to the people that live in there, and maybe also making a slight sort of documentary about it at the same time as taking their photo. But yeah, that's another thing I've got going on. There's multiple, but we'd be here all day. Yeah, I mean, I take photos because I enjoy it. But yeah, it is, for me, it's a bit of an addiction that I'm happy to have. Like, I do, wake up and go to sleep thinking about photos or photo projects or ideas. Like I said to you, I could be listening to a song and hear a lyric, and all of a sudden that'll make me think of a photo idea, so it's like photography is always on my brain. And I think for most photographers, that's just how it is. Once you get that bug, you can't shake it.
Thank you for watching. Thanks to Tom for being patient throughout this entire process and for sharing his story and his experience with us. Again, a special thanks to Graham for letting us use his studio, the Glass Factory, which is in Essex. It's a great place, complete with darkroom facilities. So if you want to do a studio shoot on film, from shoot to print, all in one place, it's a great place to go to. I'll link the studio details in the description, and of course Tom's socials below as well. Hope that was interesting and useful in some ways. Let me know if you'd be interested in seeing more of these videos in the comments below. And if you have any questions to Tom or myself, feel free to leave them in the comment. I'm sure we'll get back to you. But yeah, thank you so much for giving us your time. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.